Hi folks, Rodney back again. Hey, today I'm going to do a quick review on my 2022 KTM 250XC TPI. I just got the bike. In fact, this is the first time I've actually ridden it, and I'll throw in some footage there of my ride as well. But I did a little bike build on it, and so I'm going to kind of run through some of the parts that I've done real quick and just kind of tell you about my initial impressions. First off, initial impressions. Everybody has talked or mentioned about the TPI being a little softer on the bottom, and it definitely is a little bit softer on the bottom. One thing about the two-stroke, depending on how you ride it, a lot of times you're going to stab the clutch a little bit to get it up in the RPMs to hit that power band anyway, and so honestly it's not that big a deal. One of the things that I did notice and people have mentioned is that it actually lugs a little bit better than what the carbureted bikes did. I did have a 2019 KTM 250XC that was carbureted. That bike was fast. It screams on the top, but obviously down low there was a lot of gurgling. It still hit a little harder on the bottom than what this does until it gets up into the upper RPMs. But there again, it like I said, it gurgled all the time until you hit that higher RPMs, and then it just screamed. One of the things that you would always notice with the carbureted bikes is you'd always have spooge coming out of the back. You can see there with the TPI that there's absolutely nothing there, and it runs clean all the way through. A lot of people have had the idling issue, and so some people will do an idle mod. I've heard other people say some of them are not that way, and I've been lucky. This one does not have a low idle, and it seems to run fine. So no issues with it stalling like some people have had. Obviously this is your sump here, or should say your storage for the injector. It does add a little bit of weight to the bike. Honestly, you don't feel the weight. I never once thought, wow, this feels heavier than the 2019 that I had. So but really happy with that. It does seem like it spools up a little quicker. So I mentioned it's a little softer on the bottom, but when it does start hitting the power band, it seems like it's very quick. And like I said, it seems to run clean all the way through the RPM range. So happy about that. What else? Just kind of give you a little backstory. I just got this bike. I had and just sold a KTM 350 XEF. It was a 2021. I rode it for a year. I also have a 2019 YZ 450 FX. It was tough for me going from the YZ, which I still have, but riding that and then going to the 350, because I tried to ride it like a 450, and you can't do that. You can't ride the bike the same. The 350, you kind of have to be up in the upper RPMs. You'll see a lot of guys love that bike on the track, and I can definitely see why. Once you do get up in the upper RPMs in the power band, that thing screams, and it revs very quick. And so if you change how you ride it more like a 250 than you do a 450, you won't have any issues. In fact, the guy that I sold it to, he says, hey, I'm having a hard time getting over the jumps. And I asked him, I said, well, are you stabbing the clutch when you're coming out of the corners? He's like, no. And I said, well, you can't ride it like your 500 that you have. You have to go back and you kind of ride it like a 254 stroke, and you got to keep it up in the RPMs, and then you'll have all the power that you need. And so when I talked to him the next time, he's like, oh yeah, that works. So it's just a different way to ride. Now, obviously riding out here in the trails, there's situations where that low end torque really comes in handy. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to go back to the 252 stroke, is because with that, there's a lot of times you can just kind of lug over the rocks and roots and stuff if you need to kind of go where like the 350 would have a tendency to stall at the low RPMs. So anyway, that's a little backstory on it. Let's talk about the bike build for a minute. So obviously I put the SKDA graphics. I'm not going to say SKDA is the best graphics out there, because I know that there's some others that are thicker and probably more durable, but these are probably some of the easiest graphics that I've ever put on. Now, I've used I buy most of my parts through Rocky Mountain ATVMC.com. Getting theirs, they're actually a little thicker, and so they don't go on quite as easy, and they're probably a little easier to get some air bubbles. Obviously, you have to take a little more time to do that, and then of course the heat gun is your friend. I also got another set from 396 Graphics, and Those are probably the worst graphics I've ever put on. I have those on my YZ. On those, because they're so thick, they don't, if you go around any type of a corner, you know, even using a heat gun or a blow dryer, they still don't mold very well. And I had some real issues. And then I had a plastic piece, like on my YZ, the gas tank sits down through here. Went right back over the gas tank, and it didn't stick. It actually bubbled off there. And when I talked to the guys, like, oh, well, what did you do to clean them? And I used, you know, brake cleaner, which I always use, and or contact cleaner. And he's like, oh, no, you can't use that. And I'm like, well, I've done it on every other set I've ever done and never had an issue. And so anyway, he tried to play it off that I just wasn't installing them correctly. But, you know, like I said, I love the way the SKDA stickers go on, or graphics. You know, they just look a lot cleaner. You know, they go on, they're smooth. Like I said, they're a little thinner, and they may not be as durable as far as writing. But anyway, I think they look a lot better, and you know, you have a lot of different options to choose from all the different brands and bikes. So I did that. I'm kind of telling myself here. So I bought a Rabaconda, and if anybody knows what a Rabaconda is, it's a tire changing machine. It's kind of a stand that you put the bike tires on, and then it has a thing that you can pull down a lever that kind of breaks the bead on the tires. And it's really more for the moose, the bib moose, but you can use it for tube as well. Well, anyway, long story short, the original factory wheels that I got, they come standard with Dunlop AT81s, and I've never been fond of that tire, at least not out here. They probably have their place in like the really wet, and honestly, it probably would have been decent today, but really wet, rocky, rooty. Those tires are a little more pliant. They will flex a little bit more, so it makes it a little better in the woods, and like I said, in the really muddy type stuff. But other than that, when you get into the dry pack or hard pack, the sidewall on those are really soft. And so what happens, and I can notice it more in the back than the front, with the AT81, that sidewall was wanting to roll when I come around through corners. So honestly, it felt like I had a flat tire many different times, and I keep stopping to figure out what's going on, and come to find out there's nothing wrong. It's just the way the sidewalls are flexing. So I went to the Dunlop MX53s, and they've done some great testing on them. Motocross racers love the MX53 front. They actually would normally go to an MX33 rear because they like that better on the track. But they said the front tire is great everywhere. And I agree. I've run, this is what, the third MX53 that I've had? Actually fourth. And I've had nothing but great things to say about that tire. So, you know, that's a great addition. In the back, I am running an MX33, and it's only because they didn't have an MX53 at the time. So I run my MX33 on my YZ, and I really like it there. So I went on ahead and went with that tire. The one thing I will say is that in the hard pack, the MX53 is probably the best, at least the best tire I've ever used. I really love the tires on that because they're the way the tread pattern is set up, and you can probably see it more on the front than the back. On the front, you have this horseshoe shape, and so they're very strong, they're very durable, but the way they bite the ground when you're stopping is great. In the back, the tread pattern is a little bit different. So we're on the MX33. You have this wide bar in the middle. Well, on an MX53, you have like a knobby here and a knobby over here, but they're really close together. Almost acts the same as this, but because they're separated and they have a tie bar in between, it actually makes it more stable on the hard pack. And so I really like those tires. And out here where we ride, you know, it's been raining like crazy. But you know, in the summertime when it's dry, it gets really hard pack out here and really dusty, and so the MX53 really shines at that time. Back to my story that I started with about the Rabaconda. So anyway, in the process of changing tires, I bent the original spokes using that machine. And what happened is I didn't have it up here on the nipples. I had it a little further up here on the spoke. If you've ever looked at a KTM spoke, they're tapered, and they get really narrow up close to the nipple itself. And a lot of people talk about breaking the spokes rather. So anyway, I was already thinking about going to like a black wheel with an orange hub. And so I started looking around. I've run the Tusk Impact wheels before. Unfortunately, they're out of stock. And they have been for quite some time because I looked about 6 months ago. But anyway, I found these set by W. So these are called W Edge wheels. The hub is a forged aluminum rather than a billet aluminum like the Talon and the Kite hubs would be. And then the other thing too, I noticed that these are actually a little darker than what they would be with the Talon or the Kite. And I really wish they had been a little bit lighter, but it doesn't look bad. The one thing that I do like is that because W laces up all the wheels for, you know, the XL and other brands, and then you get to pick, a lot of times you get to pick what type of hub you want to put in it for the racers. Because I ride trails and I'm not doing a lot of jumps all the time, I didn't feel the need to spend that extra $600 or $700 to go with that set. So these now are $7.99. If you use the Pulp MX discount and just type in Pulp MX, it will give you a 10% discount. So anyway, I went with those. The one thing that I really like about them, when I got them, they were trued. And that's the benefit of having these guys. They actually go through and lace up the wheels rather than having, you know, just somebody else assemble them. The Tusk Impact wheels that I had before, they were horrible as far as the way they were laced up. And so, you know, there's just, you could sit there and you could spin the wheel and you could see it wobble, and you don't have that with these at all. So been very happy. Today was the first time I really rode it on the trails. It's got 2 hours on it now. Of course, I put my heat cycle on it, but I'd never really hit any trails or anything before, and it did amazing. Really happy with the performance, happy with the bike. I did put the Acerbis skid plate